right? So before moving further, we will just once discuss what all we discussed in the last class. Okay, first we started with the steering system. What are the functions of a steering system? We discussed there are more. There are four important functions. One is to help the vehicle in moving in the particular direction, reduce the driver effort. Then the major thing is it has to absorb the shocks in the roads, and it should not be transferred to the arms of the driver. Okay, so these are some of the function. First, before going ahead, we have to study about 5 different steering geometry: camber, caster, kingpin inclination, combined angle and scrub radius, toe in or toe out. So these things we have to study. First thing we studied about camber, right? So it is the left or right, I can call it in simple words, with respect to the center axis. Do you have any doubts in this? Yes, please unmute yourself. Do you have any doubts in this?
No, sir.
Akshay, Ashok, can we move further?
Yeah, sure,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Next, we discussed about caster. In general, front or back movement, I mean alignment of wheel with respect to center axis. Okay, if it is front, we call it as positive caster. If it is rear, it is called as, I mean, if we align the axis towards the behind, we call it as negative caster. Any doubts in this?
No, sir.
Okay. So also we discussed that caster, why it is required to bring back the wheel to its original condition. If you are steering the vehicle through a curve, okay, once the curve is over, if you just loosen your hands on the steering, automatically it will come back to the original position. Okay, in some of the mechanisms, the reversing back will be very rapid. Okay, it has to gradually come back. Suddenly, if it come back, what happens? The vehicle will move in reverse direction. Okay, so for example, just a simple hand sketch I'll try to demonstrate. See, for example, if you are moving through a curve like this, once the curve is over and the road gets stable, you will just leave the steering. It has to move in the stable direction. If it reverses back rapidly, what happens? As the vehicle was moving in this direction, suddenly if you leave the steering, gradually it has to come back. Instead of coming back, it will start moving in the reverse direction. Okay. So in order to avoid that, a damper will be used. Okay, so it will avoid the rapid turning back to its original axis. The steering turning back to original axis will be slower then. So damper will be added. So these things we have discussed in the last class. Okay. Next important thing is kingpin. I think this also we had completed in the last class. Correct? So with this sketch, you can clearly understand the concept of kingpin. See, this is your steering axis, right? So this is the linkage which operates the steering, right? So if you draw a axis line, it will be like this, and this will be the center line of the wheel. Vertical line, if you draw, it will be the vertical line. So this angle is called as the kingpin inclination. Okay. So the angle between the steering axis and the vertical of the vehicle or vertical of the tire, we call it as the steering axis inclination, or we call it as kingpin inclination. Why the name kingpin? So this is the kingpin is the thing which joins the steering mechanism to the wheel. So this portion, whatever is there, we call it as kingpin. So this inclination, we call it as the kingpin axis. Okay. So in this sketch, you can clearly understand what is camber also. Okay. It's very clear here. Okay. Next, just take down this. Next, two terminologies we have to discuss. One is the included angle, and second is the scrub radius. Please take down. With the help of sketches, I'll explain you. I'll give you 2 minutes. Please make a note of it. Okay, is it done?
Yes, sir.
See, it is the angle formed in the vertical plane between the wheel center line and the kingpin center line. So as I told you, this is the kingpin. Okay, this portion we call it as the kingpin, which connects the steering to the wheel. Okay, if you take the axis of this and the center line axis, the angle between those two is called as the included angle, IA. Okay, also you can call it as the sum of camber. So this is the camber, small positive camber is given here, plus kingpin inclination. Okay, so the tire wheel axis to the kingpin, to the kingpin axis, we call it as the kingpin inclination. So this part is kingpin inclination. Okay, the tire axis to the kingpin axis, okay, plus the camber portion, if you take, it is called as the included angle. In general, included angle is the sum of kingpin inclination plus the camber. Okay, I'll repeat once again from beginning. Okay, so first the camber is the center line of the vehicle to the center line of the tire. We call it as the camber. Correct. So this we have discussed in the last class. So if you take the original center line, this will be the center line. Usually plus 2 degrees camber will be given to increase the stability of the vehicle. So this is the actual center line, 0 degrees. The actual tire inclination will be at this point. So this we call it as camber, as discussed earlier. Okay. So this tire axis to the kingpin axis. Okay. So kingpin is a component which connects the steering system to the wheel. Okay. The tire axis and to the kingpin axis, we call it as the kingpin inclination, KPA. I'll call it as KPA, kingpin inclination. This is the camber. The sum of camber and kingpin inclination, we call it as the included angle, or okay, it is the angle between the vertical axis and the kingpin axis. Is it clear? Yes, any doubts?
Yes, sir. No, sir.
Okay. Next, scrub radius. Okay, so scrub radius is defined as, it is the point where the wheel center line and the steering axis hits the ground. It's very clear. Okay, it's in simple form. Okay, it is the point where the wheel center line. So which is the wheel center line here? Let me erase 1 second, please. Okay, so first we'll take one after the other sentence. First we'll go ahead with the wheel center line. So this is the wheel center line. You can see that is 0 degree line or pure vertical line is the wheel center line. It hits the ground at this point. Okay, next, steering axis. Okay, steering axis is this one, or it is the kingpin axis. Okay, it hits the ground at this point. The distance between these two, we call it as the scrub radius or pivot angle radius. Both mean the same. Once again, I'll repeat. It is the point where the wheel center line, so this is the wheel center line or vertical axis, and steering axis hits the ground. So this is the wheel center line, it hits the ground at this point. This is the steering axis or kingpin axis that hits the ground here. The distance between them, we call it as the scrub radius. If scrub radius is 0, the wheel always drives straight. That is, if this kingpin axis collides with this, exactly if it is like this, 1 second. Okay, so this is the center axis. If the kingpin axis is somewhere here, we call it as the scrub radius as 0. There will be no distance between these two. If scrub radius is 0, the wheel drives straight ahead. If it is negative, the wheel will always toe in, okay, for giving better conditions, driving conditions. What is this toe in and what is toe out? We will study in the next slides. Okay, so always this scrub radius is maintained a little bit negative to ensure the better driving conditions. 1 second, we'll go back. In this sketch, you can clearly see. So this is the steering axis, correct? Okay, and this is the vertical axis of the wheel. The angle between these two, we call it as the kingpin inclination, right? And this is the actual tire axis. So this we call it as the included angle. So this is the camber, this is the camber, this is the kingpin inclination. The sum of two, we call it as the included angle. Okay, you can see here the vertical line hits the ground at this point. The steering axis hits the ground at this point. The distance between two, we call it as the scrub radius. Suppose if these two meet at a common point, then the scrub radius will be 0. If the steering axis crosses the center line or vertical line, okay, and hits the ground on the other side, it is called as the negative scrub radius. If you see this animation, you can clearly understand. Any doubts, you can ask me here. So we have distinguished between positive scrub radius and negative scrub radius in this sketch. Any doubts, you can ask me. Otherwise, you take down this rough sketch. See, you can just avoid this part. Just take down the axis. You call it as the steering axis. Okay. So then rest of the things you can take down clearly. So it will be easy for you to understand. See, if you can draw the sketches, it is very much easier to explain these terms. Any doubts? Another 2-3 definitions are there. After that, it is purely theory only. Initially, these angles you have to understand. After that, it is purely theory part, which you can easily do it. Please take down. Is it done?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have completed included angle and scrub radius. The last, I think 1 or 2 terms are left. Toe in or toe out. Okay. So toe is the difference between the front and rear edges of a set of tires. If you take a set of tires, I've taken here, clearly you can see the front end of the cars. Okay, both the tires put together, we call it as one set of tires. If you take the rear end, both the tires put together, we call it as other set of tires. Okay, so one set of tires I have taken. Toe is the difference between the front and rear edges of one set of tires. Okay, when the wheels are parallel to each other, for example, if the wheel is vertical like this, okay, both the wheels are exactly straight, no camber, no caster, everything is 0 degrees, then it is called as toe is 0. There is no question of toe. If you, whether you take the front end, so this is the front end and this is the rear end, if I consider, both are parallel, so there will be toe is 0, right? So when the front edges of the tire are close together, we call it as toe in or toe is positive. You can see the front edges are close to each other. This is the vertical axis. Some camber is given. Okay, you can see on both the ends. So front edges of the tire are close together, then it is called as the positive toe, or we call it as the tires are toed in. When the rear edges of the tire are closer together like this, okay, then it is called as toe out or negative. So is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so usually there will be a little bit toe out, okay, because of the steering and steering angle setting, the camber, caster, inclinations. When you set, there will be obviously little bit of toe out. We have seen always positive camber should be given to increase the stability of vehicle. Definitely there will be some toe out. In order to compensate the toe out, a small toe in angle will be set during the alignment. Okay, so this is the concept of toe in or toe out. Okay, so once again I'll repeat, if the front edges are closer together, we call it as toe in. If the rear edges are close together, we call it as toe out. If the front and rear edges are parallel, okay, as shown in this rough sketch, then it is called as toe is 0. Right? So please make a note. Okay, so next, slip angle. Just make a note, we will discuss. Please make a note of it.
Yes, sir. 2 minutes. Done, sir.
Yes. See, while taking the turn, you can see in this first sketch. Okay. So when the vehicle is taking a turn, the centrifugal force acts on the vehicle. Okay. It produces a side thrust. Okay. It will pull the vehicle towards one side. Okay. To sustain that force, the plane of the wheel must make some angle with the direction of motion of the vehicle. Okay. This angle is called as the slip angle. Okay. To overcome the side thrust during turns, okay, the plane of the wheel should make certain angle with respect to the road. That is called as the side thrust. Okay, the angle through which the wheel has to turn to sustain the side force, or you can call it as the centrifugal force. The angle through which the wheel has to turn to sustain the centrifugal force is called as the slip angle. Okay. So you can see in the second sketch, this red line represents the direction of travel. Okay. And this black dotted line will give you the direction of tire. Okay. Suddenly there will be a curve, so you have to move it. The angle between these two, we call it as the slip angle.